For refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so last week we finished the section on that explains how to go about relating to a spiritual teacher, and we started the section on the actual meditation session, which begins with the preliminaries. And so just briefly to review, right, so we were talking about, like, so this is actually this section is actually the instruction on, like, how to organize your daily practice, right, of the stages of the path to enlightenment, right, so every day. So we started with the first, so we started with that first point, right, about, so you would, if you, for example, like in your home, right, that you would create a little space for meditation. And if you're practicing the stages of the path to enlightenment, right, then you would have a number of things there, right? One is you would have at least, it could be a very ornate, huge altar, or it could be a small altar. But you would have on that altar, you would have as it said here, the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, right? So you would have representations. So you would have representation of the body of the Buddha, which would either be a statue or just a picture, painting, whatever you like. Right? A representative speech would be a text, right, that represents the speech of the Buddha. So it could be the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra or one of the Lamrim texts. And then representation of the mind of the Buddha, which could be either an actual stupa or image of a stupa or a Vajra and bell. Right? Those are the options for the mind of the Buddha. Then you would also have on that altar, it says, lay out some offerings, right? So some offerings, whatever you would want to offer. Right? So traditionally people offer water bowls and lights, but you can offer real flowers, you can offer fake flowers, there are lots of things you can offer, right? Incense and so on. Really anything that's beautiful to you that you can offer on your altar. And the first point, actually, I skipped over, is you would also, each day, you would at least briefly, before meditating, you would clean up your meditation area, right? And as you think that, you think I'm cleaning, what we said, there's a verse from the Buddha, right? Cleaning out the dust and cleaning out the stains, right? So you think I'm cleaning out my own mental afflictions, right? My negative states of mind, and the imprints that give rise to those, right? So that's the way as you're cleaning up your meditation place, you think like that. Right? So these are the preliminary, right? So the first one is you clean up the meditation place. Before that, of course, you have these representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind there. Second point is you lay out some offerings. Third point we went over last time, and this is where the last point we covered, was then you, on a cushion where the back is a little higher than the front, you sit in that 8-point, or 7 or 8, depending how you count them, the 8th if you want to include the breathing point posture of Vairocana, they call it, right? So with your legs, if you can, with both legs, with like with both, you would have this one up as well, right, like that. But if you can't sustain that, then you just keep one up. So I think I'll do that for a while talking. But your back straight and so on. We went over these 8, right? Your hands in this posture with the triangle, just below the level of the navel. Your head just very slightly kind of tilted down. Your mouth relaxed, but closed, with your tongue kind of toward or touching the roof of the mouth. Your eyes kind of not totally closed, but like half closed and looking down. Almost like looking on the plane of your nose, right? Your shoulders straight and relaxed. And then we said this, right? So last time I just wanted to go over this. So that if your mind is already peaceful, then you just go into the meditation. If your mind is not, if your mind's feeling agitated, then you can do breathing meditation at that point. And either you know, you can either just do the simple technique of watching the breath naturally as it flows, or there's that the 9 rounds of breathing, which we can go over another time. Which we'll go over that when we cover calm abiding. But those are ways of calming the mind, right? Making the mind more peaceful and more suitable to meditation. Okay, so that's where we got up to. And next comes, right, so this is your daily practice. This is like how you would start, right? I remember last time I said this, right, like this, I got a joke that the breathing, watching the breath is like the stretching out or warming up before actual meditation, right? And so this is an important point though, right? That this, you know, what we're going through here, like sometimes in the West, people don't, what's I say? People only do that, right? We said that last time. People just sit down and like they don't have, you know, they don't do any of these other things. They just sit down and watch their breath. And that's some benefit, but for there's some benefit to that in terms of your health, for example, you know, things like that. But in terms of the path to enlightenment, that's just one small part, right? So we want to. This is going through actually how you would do a complete meditation session. So the next thing after sort of making your mind peaceful, the next thing it says here in the text is visualization of the merit field. And so you might say, well, what does that mean, merit field, right? So the idea, the reason they call it that, is like a farmer. It's a metaphor, right? A farmer has a field, right, in which they plant crops and then grow vegetables and fruits and so on. The idea being that this visualization is the field through which we plant seeds of merit and good karma, and also through which we purify our mind in order to achieve enlightenment. So this visualization is like a field in which we cultivate our merit. Does that make sense? And there are, now, I'll read the actual line here. It's very brief in the middle length Lam Rim. Lama Tsongkhapa says, so we're on page 28. Right? He says, in the space in front of you, imagine that there abide the lineage gurus of vast conduct and profound view, and countless Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Arhats, Arya hearers, solitary realizers, along with their attendants. Thus, you should visualize the merit field. So he kind of describes it very briefly there. In other Lam Rim texts, they give more detail. But so now what the commentaries say is it depends on your capacity for visualization, what you want to visualize at this point. But in general, I'll start with the simple version, then we'll get slightly more elaborate. Okay, simple version actually, which Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't explicitly mention here, but it's implied or implicit in the Lam Rim tradition, is you actually visualize yourself first of all, right? Surrounded by all sentient beings, right? And that's a reminder that the whole purpose of practicing meditation is compassion, right? Is compassion for others. And traditionally, actually, they say, if you can, which you can at least imagine it, right, or visualize or sort of think, that on your right side is your father, on your left side is your mother, kind of behind you are your family and friends, in front of you are people you have a hard time with, right, because we're including them also in our compassion.
We'll keep them in front of you.
See what they and then all around are all sentient beings, right, in the form of human beings. We imagine them, even if they're not human, we imagine them in the form of human, for auspiciousness for them, because that's when we'll be able to, someday when we're enlightened and we're going to help all sentient beings, it'll be easier to help them when they're in the human form. So we're visualizing that for kind of auspiciousness. You're actually creating a kind of a karmic imprint to help others. That's the idea. And you're reminding yourself that the reason you're meditating is for all of them, right? And also that you're also, by visualizing them, you're also, one is you're remembering that, the other is also a visualized reminder that we're not alone, right? That we're interdependent with all other sentient beings. That in some sense, that all sentient beings always have been with us and always will be with us. That we're sometimes we feel the sense of isolation or separateness, but actually we're deeply connected, right, to all sentient beings. There are whole contemplations on that, right? Actually, we could forget that, right? But then you remember, well, wait a second, like the cushion I'm sitting on, I didn't make it. Right? The floor that it's on, I didn't make that. Right? The room I'm sitting in, how many people contributed to the building of that room, right? So in that sense, we really are with all, we forget that, right? We're sitting there, we think, oh, I'm just here alone in my room, right? But actually this, I know why your mom and dad, right? Actually, where'd this body come from, right? It came from them, right? Where all the food you ate, where did it come from, right? So, so even when you feel alone, you're actually not alone in the sense that our very nature is to be interdependent and dependent upon others, right? Right? Where, if we're reading, where did we learn to read? Right? If we're speaking, where did we learn to speak? If we're thinking thoughts, where did we learn them, right? Actually, we already are always, let's sort of say this, in a sense, interwoven with and interdependent with others. We forget that, so visualizing them also helps us remember the reality of our situation, which is one is, the purpose of our life, as this for practicing this path is compassion and loving kindness, right? The other, though, is that we already are, is like we're deeply interdependent with others, and so this is a reminder of that. Then, having visualized, so we're sort of there with all sentient beings. And now, at the minimum, like Lama Tsongkhapa gives a longer one, but the commentary says if you're not good at visualizing, the minimum would be to visualize the simplest version, right? Would be you visualize the Buddha there in front of you, kind of a body's length away, made of light, like kind of golden in color, made of light. And you would imagine also, like on the altar, actually, you would imagine a text there, right? That symbolizes the Buddha's teachings. And the Buddha is not solid. He's made of kind of golden light. You can kind of almost, he's translucent, so you can see through him. And you think that the Buddha in this case, is the embodiment of all of your teachers, all of your personal spiritual guides, your personal gurus, whatever you want to say, right? That he's sort of the symbolized, because earlier we contemplated, right, the benefits of sort of that kind of contemplation. So here we're engaging in a visualization form. So you think like that. And actually what you really would think at that point is he, the Buddha in this case, also is the embodiment of all my teachers, of all the lineage teachers, of all the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the Arhats, the Arya hearers and the solitary realizers and so on, all the protectors, all the Dakas and Dakinis, all the deities, you would think he's the embodiment of all that. That's the very simplest possible visualization. Now, I want to say these, there are many other ways of visualizing the merit field. So there are probably like, some, for example, so we say this, like in different practices, sometimes instead of the Buddha, one, can, like if one's doing Tara practice, one will visualize Tara, and if one's doing Manjushri practice, one will visualize Manjushri. For Lamrim, in the Lamrim teachings that come down in this lineage from Lama Tsongkhapa's lineage, another common one that I'll just mention and kind of go through very briefly, that's more in detail, and it's kind of more similar to what he says here, what Lama Tsongkhapa says here, is they call it the Guru Puja merit field, which is a much more complex merit field. It's pictured in this painting here, the one right there. So if you like more complex visualizations that you can visualize, the Guru Puja merit field. In that case, you imagine this kind of, you're imagining still yourself there with all sentient beings, but in front of you, you imagine a kind of beautiful celestial lake. And then coming out of that lake is a kind of a wish-fulfilling tree with a golden trunk, and with like, it's all made of light, right? With this kind of golden, radiating gold and translucent. And then like you imagine that the leaves and the flowers are all translucent, and sort of the fruits are kind of like, look like precious jewels, kind of they're radiant and translucent and beautiful like that. And the leaves are all like made of light, and just the sound of them kind of makes the sound of Dharma. This is if you want to do complex visualization, right? And then just to give a sense of how complex it is and beautiful. Then in the middle of that, actually, I'll give kind of the center, near the top of the tree in the middle, is the central figure of the married field, which in that case is actually Lama Tsongkhapa, the author of this text, and he's wearing like the paintings on the side here.
You see right there?
So, yeah, there's Lama Tsongkhapa. So he, like in the picture, he's wearing a kind of yellow pandit's hat, which symbolizes, pandit means great learning, right? A person of great learning. So it's sort of the tradition comes from India. And its golden color symbolizes that he realized the highest or most perfect view, emptiness. He realized that correctly. And he was a great scholar and so on. And he's wearing the robes of a monk. And in this case, that's a different, in the Guru Puja married field, in one hand he's like kind of holding a hand here with a begging bowl, which like, symbolizing a monk. He's a monk, and also the begging bowl is filled with nectar. And here his hand is in this mudra, or gesture, which symbolizes teaching. So he's the central figure. Now in his heart, actually, in the Guru Puja married field, in his heart is the Buddha. Then in the Buddha's heart, you visualize another form of the Buddha, a blue Buddha embracing a consort named Vajradhara. And then in Vajradhara's heart is a little tiny syllable hum, that microscopic almost, the size of a mustard seed. That's just the central figure. Then, now it says here, like Lama Tsongkhapa describes, the lineage of gurus of vast conduct. So you can see on the right, they're all, maybe it's hard to see from that distance, but on the right of him, starting with Maitreya, and then the great, you visualize, actually like His Holiness Dalai Lama often talks about the great masters of Nalanda. And so these are the lineage masters whose teachings came down from the Buddha to your personal teachers, right? So you would visualize, so one side is the lineage of vast conduct. This is the lineage that taught the teachings of the details of the path, of the ways of cultivating bodhicitta, of the vast conduct of the bodhisattvas. So that includes like Maitreya, and then Asanga and his brother Vasubandhu, and then coming down through other masters like Haribhadra, and then down to Atisha, who brought that lineage to Tibet, who we mentioned earlier in the classes. And then from Atisha, it breaks into three separate lineages of the old Kadampa tradition. And they come down then to Lama Tsongkhapa himself, and then the Gelugpa teachers down through Lama Tsongkhapa to whoever, to His Holiness Dalai Lama, for example. The other side, is it says here, is the lineage of profound view, right? That's the lineage of teaching emptiness. So starts with Manjushri, and then Nagarjuna, and Aryadeva, and Buddhapalita, and Chandrakirti. By the way, these names you may not know, but they're the names that His Holiness Dalai Lama is always talking about when he says the great Nalanda masters. And His Holiness often says, Tibetan Buddhism isn't really Tibetan Buddhism, actually. He says Tibetan Buddhism is preserving the Nalanda tradition, which are these great scholars from North India who are included in this merit field. Most of them are included in this particular visualization. And what His Holiness is saying is Tibetan Buddhism is, the role of Tibetan Buddhism really in the world has been to preserve the teachings of those great masters and to practice those teachings and to realize those teachings and transmit them from generation to generation. So Tibetan, he's pointing out one thing, is Tibetans didn't make up these teachings, right? Whereas they're really coming from that great tradition of Nalanda. And Nalanda really, just to be clear, was this like great, you can actually go there and see the ruins in India. But it was really the greatest Buddhist university in history. It was a humongous university that lasted for centuries. That drew the greatest minds of India, for sure, but also drew great seekers from all over Asia, right? So people came there from China, from Tibet, from Mongolia, I'm not sure about Mongolia, from Bhutan, Nepal, even from what's now Pakistan, for example, and Afghanistan, that area were, at that time, Buddhist. So kind of seekers and scholars came from all over Asia, right? Remember, Asia is the most populous part of the planet, right? And so the greatest kind of during those centuries rather, great thinkers from all over the world came there to study. Right? And generation after generation, they produced these people like Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and Aryadeva and so on. These great scholars who wrote texts, right? Kind of explaining the thought, the deep meaning of the Buddha's teachings, and explaining the thought of the Buddha, right? Explaining the Buddha's intentions correctly, and sort of teaching and explaining how to practice correctly. And so, the Tibetans, from about 800 AD until about 1100 AD, so for those few hundred years, sent scholars there and invited Nalanda scholars to Tibet and translated those texts and studied with those masters. They didn't just translate them, they actually studied with great scholars and would translate the text together to get accurate translations. They would practice meditation and so on in those traditions, and then they brought those traditions to Tibet. And then, so around 1100, right, Nalanda was destroyed by an invading army, and so those teachings were mainly preserved completely. The most complete place they were preserved was Tibet, because they had made a great effort to bring them to Tibet during those centuries. So anyway, so this merit field is showing that, what it's really showing in a sense, right, this is why Lama Tsongkhapa says this, is that, those two lineages, right, is respecting, first of all, the lineage that these teachings come from, really. That's what this is. Those people are where these teachings that we're studying come from. Right? And it's also sort of saying that our teacher, right, the Lama, like His Holiness Dalai Lama, this is actually quite true, right, embodies those teachers, right? In other words, the way, in a sense that His Holiness often says that, and it's true, or Lama Zopa Rinpoche or Khensa Rinpoche. There is what, if you look at Khensa Rinpoche's life story, which I wrote in the Easy Path at the back, he told me some details a little bit. And you see, what did he do his whole life was study the teachings of those teachers, right? Actually, I said to him, would you tell us the details of, like, your travels and he was like, he refused, actually. He just wouldn't talk about that stuff. And I kept bugging him. He was like, you don't need to ask me questions. I don't need to, who cares about my life? He kept, like, being quite dismissive of that. And I kept saying, well, I want to, but also the publisher wants that, and also people want to read that in the West. And finally he said, the only thing I'll talk about is what I studied. He said, that I can talk about. And then when he talked about what he studied, it was the text of those, right? It was like, he spent years and years studying the texts of those great masters, right? So, I think what he was saying is, my life story is that. Everything else is peripheral, isn't so important. So really, I think the teachers do represent, and do embody those. It's a visualization, but I think it's actually, that visualization is very profound, because it really says those teachers really do embody those teachings, right? There is like the teachings on emptiness from Nagarjuna and so on, right? Khensa Rinpoche spent decades studying those, right? And he's still studying them, and like his life is the embodiment of meditation on those. That's what he spent his life doing. He doesn't care, like to him it's not interesting to say, oh, I went to Singapore or United States, or that's not a significant event in his life, right? Though, unless he was going to teach, but it's like, the point is those teachings, right? And the practices, and the sort of embodying those and transmitting those, that's what matters. Anyway, so in this visualization, you visualize those two coming down, and then above the central figure of Lama Tsongkhapa, what they call a three-tiered being, right? Because he's Lama Tsongkhapa, but then he has the Buddha, and then, and so on, and Vajradhara, and so on. And then I'll just won't go through too much detail, but above him there are these line of the Mahamudra teachers that came down, and then these various tantric lineages that came down to Lama Tsongkhapa, and down to our own teachers. So it's also showing that not only to the vast and profound, which go into the Lamrim, but also all these different tantric lineages also come to your teacher. And then below the teacher, there's this kind of on the tree there are these levels of the tree, like circles going around the whole tree, and on those are or much of what Lama Tsongkhapa lists here. So you visualize like what's called Vajrayana deities of different classes of tantra: highest yoga tantra, performance tantra, and action tantra. Then you visualize all the Buddhas. So you visualize like the medicine Buddhas and the 1,000 Buddhas of this eon, and so on. The 35 confession Buddhas. Then all the Bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri and so on, Tara. Then solitary realizers, or they call them Pratyeka Buddhas, or solitary realizers. then hearers, right? It means like the arhats. Then dakas and dakini, so male and female sort of enlightened sky goers. Actually, is the way they use. That's a technical. Dakini means one who flows, one who goes through the sky. And then protectors, like kind of who protect, practitioners and the practitioners. Yes. So anyway, so that's the ornate visualization. If you want to do that, we can go in more detail some other time, but I want to at least give a general idea. So like, the main point is that you visualize some field of merit, right, that represent. And if I went through that partly because if you want, that's actually in the Guru Puja, we do that at the center sometimes. So like that's the visualization of the Guru Puja, which is often used here at this point. But even if you just visualize the Buddha, in a sense, you should recognize or understand that it embodies all of that. Right? That Buddha who you're visualizing, made of light, in a sense, is the embodiment of all those of the Buddha, of your teachers, but also of Nagarjuna and so on, all those great masters, and also all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the deities.
So my question is like, so why are the Mahamudra, isn't it like same as Nagarjuna teaching in the back?
Oh, so the Mahamudra lineage that's direct, so like there are four, like if you visualize this way, there are like, it's almost like there's like four different lineages, and in the middle of those four is the Mahamudra lineage. Mm-hmm. That particular lineage is this, now what that lineage is that it's said that Lama Tsongkhapa himself, when he did retreat, he would have these visions of Manjushri. So he had studied the teachings of Nagarjuna, but then, remember now, Nagarjuna's lineage started with Manjushri, right? And then came down through Nagarjuna, and his student Aryadeva, and then Buddha Palita, and so on, down through Chandrakirti. But then it said that, so Lama Tsongkhapa studied those and embodied those lineages, right? So those lineages came to Lama Tsongkhapa. This Mahamudra lineage there has a significance, which is this, is that that particular lineage is that Lama Tsongkhapa himself had these visions of Manjushri, and Manjushri taught him directly certain details of how to meditate on emptiness and on Mahamudra. And then, actually, if you read, Professor Jan Willis wrote a very nice book called Enlightened Beings that tells about this lineage. So Lama Tsongkhapa had these visions of Manjushri, and then he didn't, like these texts, he wrote many texts, but the teachings of Manjushri were kind of a secret personal instruction to him, right? Personal advice from his teacher. So he taught that to a few of his students. And then there became this kind of a one-to-one, what's the word to say this? Oral transmission of those teachings on Mahamudra, where it was just taught from from the teacher to just a handful of students, or sometimes just to one student, who then taught it to another and another. And so this is that lineage. So it starts with Lama Manjushri, then Lama Tsongkhapa, and I think there's a Jampo Gyatso is one of the, and then so on. It came down through a lineage. And then what happened was that for quite a few generations, it was just an oral lineage that was sort of taught, in addition to the others. Like all the masters who studied that also studied the vast, the profound, but it was a particular instructions on meditation. Does that make sense? And then the first Panchen Lama, Losing Choki Gyaltsen, who wrote the Guru Puja, he was the first one to write it down. In other words, he decided that it was such a precious oral instruction, and that if it was one-to-one, someday somebody could pass away before teaching it, and then it would be lost. And so he decided it was good to write some parts of it down, so he did. And then since then, some people have written about it. But it's still also an oral, in other words, to really study it, one has to receive some oral instructions from somebody who received them. So it's not that it's a different teaching. They clarify very clearly. It's not that it's different from what Nagarjuna taught, but it's just some details of how to meditate, like practical instructions in a way, for how to gain realizations quickly, and how to sort of understand the essence of Nagarjuna's teachings, for example, in a kind of efficient and clear and way. So it's that. So it's not that it's different, but it's sort of a sort of personal instruction lineage of Mahamudra. So that's why they visualize that separately. Okay. Wow. So that's the visualization of the merit field. Wow, we took a while on that one. It's okay. But do you get the feeling, actually? Like, the feeling is, I want to say something about that. Going on and on about the merit field, which I wasn't the plan. I thought we were going to go quickly through stuff. But but actually it's important, like sometimes I think in the West we don't, I'm gonna say it right. Sometimes in the West we don't emphasize this point very much. And it is tempting for me not to, because it's like sort of, I don't know what to say. It could seem like it's too foreign, I guess, or something, I don't know. Like,
You're doing your motivation too.
what's that?
You're doing your motivation also
Yeah.
for compassion.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And one thing I want to say about the merit field is, like, part of this idea of the merit field is, right, that you yourself actually are by visualizing those people, right, those beings, you yourself are developing a relationship to them, you know. And Pamon Rinpoche points this out. He says in his Lam Rim text, which is a commentary, right, he says, you know, if you visualize them, and if you visualize those different figures in the merit field, and you pray to them, and you think of them, and so on, Pamon Rinpoche says, then eventually you'll come to understand their teachings. Right? And if you don't, you won't, right? And I want to point something out about that, because like it could seem very foreign visualizing, but actually, like, I always thought this was funny. In the Introduction to Tantra, somebody says to Lama Yeshe, I'm not good at visualizing, and he says, pizza. And the person goes, what do you want? And the person's like, yeah, you can have like with pepperoni, without pepperoni, there's sausage, and they can visualize all the details of a pizza. And then he said, you're just not visualizing, you know, he's pointing out, you're just not good at visualizing enlightened things. You're very good at visualizing pizza. You know, and like sometimes I joke, like with, let's say this, like if you talk to to people, right? Actually, everybody has not merit field, right? But I would call it their desire field, which is different than merit field, right? It's their visualization, right? But actually, everybody does it, right? You can visualize the people you're mad at, the people you, and some people have like, you could ask them, what's it, like, you know, which star married who, you know, and they could like go, oh, this person was married like 4 times, the first they married this person, right? And they have a clear visualization of like, you know, or whatever, of like Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, or I don't know who they visualize, whatever, probably out of date, but, right, like everybody visual, and you know, and the same thing though, like somebody who's interested in Civil War history, right? Then they can like visualize, you know, the generals, right? And they can see their, like, you know, and if you're interested in presidents, you can visualize them, right? Like sports, oh yeah, people are really good at that, right? Like, you know, they can visualize like every member of the team, right? And they know, and like they know their statistics and all that, right? And the point is that we all do that anyway, right? And what we think of, what we imagine, what we care about, what we sort of think about, yeah, like sports figures, right? So we think, oh, there's this team and there's that team and there are, you know, the stats, and right? And what we think about influences our reality, influences our sense of self, right? Then if you, actually it's true, think of sports teams, right? So the person who visualizes a certain team, right? Then like if somebody puts down their team, right? Then they get really mad, right? And then if somebody like, if this other team beats their team, right? People get depressed, right? Like for days sometimes. And then if their team wins, it's like they go out and smash cars. Right? Like, they get so
Enjoy.
excited. What's that?
Enjoy.
Yeah. And right, so that's why I'm calling these are like, we all have these visualizations, right? That sort of constitute in a way our sense of identity, right? My sense of identity is I'm part of this, I'm separate from that, I'm, you know, whatever, like this is mine, and you know, and so on, right? And they're all based on desire, actually, on craving, right? And on also sort of grasping, this sort of grasping at me and mine and not them and theirs, right? And so, you know, this I think is very profound psychologically, right? One is you're visualizing yourself surrounded by all sentient beings, right? So there's not a sense of this is my merit field, actually, right? There's no sense of this is for me or it's mine, right? In other words, one is doing this visualization for all others, is the first point, right? And then one is developing this relationship of saying, what do I want to embody? You know, what do I want to understand? What kind of person do I want to be, right? And the idea is these are enlightened. You know, the idea is these very simple, right? And they, you know, in these visualization, right, the two sides, for example, right? Well, one side, the vast conduct, that essentially, if you get down to it, what does that symbolize? Compassion and love, right? The other side, what does that symbolize? Wisdom, right? So it's saying, what do I want to embody? Compassion and wisdom, right? And then one is sort of, you know, instead of, what's it called? instead of sports figures or movie stars or whoever, right? We're trying to contemplate, like, what, or this visualization sort of causes us over time, if you visualize that over and over again, to start to develop a relationship with those figures, to start to feel, wow, that wisdom is something I want to understand. And I'll say one other thing, actually, Pabon Rinpoche says that is true. Like at the beginning, if you hear of like some like vast text, right, on Buddhism, you might feel, oh, I can't understand that. Right? But then if every day you visualize in these figures, right, who wrote the text, then eventually you reach the point where you say, actually, I've been thinking of them every day. Like, what did he say? What did she say? What did they write? What did they? And of course, then you start to read it, right? And at first, it's hard to understand, but then as you, and that's part of the process of this kind of visualization, right? And then slowly, what they said, which is just what they had realized in their own heart, right? You start to study it, and you start to get some understanding of it. And it's partly from this visualization. Does that make sense? And it's really true, actually, right? Like, in other words, because if you actually talk to ordinary people, like whoever they sort of think of all the time, right? They try to become like that, and they do actually become more like that. Sometimes not for the better, right? If you think of kids who like have sports heroes, for example, right? Oftentimes they want to become like that person. Now that's not always a good idea, right? Because some of those people aren't, some are nice people, but some not so great, And then, and they see that person, being very competitive, then they become more competitive. They see that person being angry, at their enemies, and then they go out on the field and they act that way, right? Well, this is a similar process, actually, right? Whereas as we're sort of visualizing these figures who embody different enlightened qualities, we're saying, I want to cultivate those enlightened qualities. And then you sort of think about that person and you imagine who they were, and you sort of read about their biography, and you get interested in that once you visualize them for a while, right? And then you start to say, who were they? And then you read their biography and you say, wow, that's amazing. Like, and you get what's there to say this? Like a role model of enlightenment, right? Or many role models of enlightenment. And that inspires or awakens your own potentials for those things. So I think it's very, very profound in a way, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so having visualized the merit field, now we're going to do what they call here 3 points. Accumulating merit and purifying negativities. There's a brief explanation, an extensive explanation, and a categorization. But basically, what this is getting at is this: Lama Tsongkhapa says here. Sometimes people just like if somebody's going to meditate on emptiness, right, or bodhicitta, they think, okay, I'll just sit down and meditate on bodhicitta. And what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying is that doesn't work well. That the meditation on bodhicitta or on emptiness or on renunciation or on perfect human rebirth, on whichever topic, should be integrated with these other practices that we're about to go through, that we just started on, right? And part of the reason for that is that we ourselves have obstacles to realizing those things, right? And by doing these other practices, we remove those obstacles and create the causes. So then when we actually meditate, if we meditate in the context of these other practices, it becomes much easier to actually realize the topic that we're meditating. And actually, Fidel, going back to your question, one of the instructions from that lineage that came from Manjushri was, there are many, but one point that it was actually when Lama Tsongkhapa was studying emptiness and trying to meditate on emptiness to realize emptiness, and it's not an easy topic to realize. And so he, it's funny, like, there aren't too many, there are a few things like translated of his conversations with Manjushri, and I think I've said this, where they're quite, sometimes they're pretty funny, actually, because, as we say, Manjushri, we sometimes think of, like, in the West, we think of, like, if somebody's seeing a deity, right, we think it's like, should be like light rays, and some kind of like, and maybe it was a bit like that, but actually, Manjushri was quite playful with Lama, and Lama Tsongkhapa, they were sort of, it was like, what's there to say, their conversations, if you read what Lama Tsongkhapa described later, in some translations, they're funny. So at one point, for example, Lama Tsongkhapa would say, is my realization this level, or that level, or this level? And we would say, you're not at any of those levels yet. What are you talking about? Like, don't be silly, kind of like, but anyway, so Manjushri, Lama Tsongkhapa said to him, well, how can I realize the view, of emptiness? And Manjushri said, which is related to what we're about to say, he said, you have to accumulate vast positive karma. You have to purify your obstacles, your negative karmic imprints. You have to make requests to your lamas, and then meditate, and you'll get the realizations. And so that's what we're doing here, in a sense, is those practices. And so one does them in this context through the 7 limbs. That's what they call it, 7-limbed practice, which appears in many, many texts, actually, in all the Tibetan traditions. And in this particular, in the middle length Lam Rim, Lama Tsongkhapa bases his explanation on it, on what he calls the prayer of good conduct. Sometimes that's translated as the prayer of good conduct. Sometimes the title also, there's a subtitle or something called the King of Prayers, or the Aspiration of Samantabhadra. There are different names for that text. But the whole text is translated into English, and it's practiced in all the Tibetan traditions. And Lama Tsongkhapa, it's a text by the Buddha. It's from a sutra. And, excuse me, Lama Tsongkhapa bases this discussion of the 7 limbs on that. And so these 7 limbs are 7 parts. So limbs just means like sections or 7 parts of the practice. These are the main way of accumulating merit and purifying negativity in order to have success in your meditation practice. So let's, so this is the next point. Having visualized the merit field, now we do the 7-limb practice. And he says here, Lama Tsongkhapa says, which brings together the key points of accumulation and purification. Okay, so now there are 7 limbs. So the first limb is prostration. And Lama Tsongkhapa here says, prostration combining the 3 doors, and prostration of the 3 individual doors. So, okay, so 3 doors in this case means like is a metaphor again. Like a door is something you go through, right? But in this case, like it's the 3. Let's just say this. The 3 ways we go about creating karma. So we go about creating karma with our body, with our speech, and with our mind. Right? And so it's like the 3 ways we do things, right? We can, because all of those are actions, right? You can do an action with your body, but there are also actions that are just mental, and there are also actions that are spoken, right? But anyway, so so Lama Tsongkhapa is saying that we want to prostrate in a way that engages our body, our speech, and our mind. And so here he starts with combining the 3 doors. Regarding the limb of prostration, prostrating, combining the 3 doors is set out. Now he quotes a verse from that text, from that sutra, the prayer of good conduct. It says, "To you lions amongst humans, who come in the 3 times." So lions amongst humans in this line means the Buddhas of the 3. That refers to the Buddhas. It's just a metaphor again. There are a lot of metaphors. Lion, we all know that, right? Lion is the king of the jungle, right? So it's saying the foremost of all humans is the Buddha. Who come in the 3 times. So it's the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. To the worlds of the 10 directions, right? So the 10 directions, right, are, you say, north, like north, south, north, north, south, east, west, and then the sub-directions, right, southeast, northeast, southwest, north, and so on, and then up and down. So it's basically saying in all directions, right? The 10 directions are just all directions. I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. And so what this is saying, right, again, I just want to point out something, like, in terms of this idea we were saying earlier about visualization, because in part, right, what does this mean, the Buddhas of the 3 times in 10 directions? One is we're trying to create, it's actually hard to do at the beginning. Do you guys mind making more commentary? Is that okay to explain more than I thought? I want to say something about this. Like, I'm just giving my own my own thought in this point. This is one point I wanted to say my own thought on it, which is, like, in our, it's like, this prayer of good conduct, right, is typical in many ways of the Mahayana sutras, which are like, which are grounded in this ethic of universal compassion, universal altruism, and bodhicitta, right? So it's a very, very vast mind that we're trying to create, right? I mean, this idea of compassion that embraces all sentient beings. And so everything here, as we go forward, is going to be vast, or infinite almost. Actually, not almost. It is infinite, actually. And what I wasn't going to mention is, like, I think if we're new to Mahayana Buddhism, that can seem hard to relate to, because say this, like, actually, we don't tend, in our cultural history, we don't tend, first of all, this goes back to long before, this goes, remember, these teachings go back thousands of years. In our culture, you don't hear much about infinite, or vast, or like these kinds of, like that, like, infinite. And if you do, it's usually, occasionally somebody will say, the one thing you usually hear is, I stood outside under the night sky and I felt so small. Right? That, if there's any contemplation of the infinite, it's that somebody kind of looks at all the galaxies and stars and says, wow, I feel really insignificant. Which is kind of actually nihilistic in a way, right? It's saying, I'm nothing, And actually, like, so a Buddhist practitioner would look up at those infinite, right, at the infinite stars and infinite galaxies and would say, what? Would say, I embrace all of them with love. Right? I embrace all that infinite space with love and compassion, right? It's a very different idea, right? And actually there are prayers in the prayer of good conduct, right? One actually prays in a sense like, may all those places and may every atom in all those places be covered with Buddhas, right? May I manifest in all those places and benefit beings. May I fill all those infinite star systems and planets and universes with love and with compassion. May I turn them all into fields of enlightenment where beings are cultivating infinite positive qualities, right? So there's a lot of contemplation of vastness, and it's creating a mind that's very vast. And so that's what this is relating to in part. And I think it's implicit here, obviously, right? When you say right, so what this is saying is, if you're, like, let's say, so you're visualizing the Buddha, like, or you have a Buddha on your altar, right, and you prostrate. What this is saying is, according to the prayer of good conduct, which is the Buddha's teaching, right? This is not, I'm not making it up, Lama Tsongkhapa didn't make it up either, but what this is saying is, as you're doing that, and actually, I'll go into more detail in the next section. So this is physical prostration. Now I'll explain what I'm starting to get at. So it says physical prostration, so I'll just read that verse, right? Again, this is from the prayer of good conduct. With the powerful prayer of good conduct, directly perceiving all the victors, means all the Buddhas, with my mind, bowing deeply with as many bodies as the atoms of the world, to all of you victors I completely prostrate. So I just want to, like, again, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, if this is not foreign to you, then great, that's really cool. But I'll share, like, how a Mahayana practitioner at this point, like, somebody, like, if all we can handle is just doing our own prostration, fine, that's a good beginning point, right? But, like, actually one time I heard Lama Zopa Rinpoche teach on this. So this is how Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he practices this perfectly, right? So how he does this when he prostrates, right? So there's a Buddha statue there, right? So, and Rinpoche's doing this, right? And then he's going to prostrate. But we'll go through the physical part of it in a second. But the idea is this, actually, so there, so we say this, 4, infinity times 4 now. So I'll describe what that means. Right? One is thinking of prostrating to infinite Buddhas, right? So it says here, bowing to as many bodies as the atoms of all of the worlds, right? It's actually countless how many atoms are on this planet, right? But this is saying all the worlds, right? So one is imagining an infinite number of Buddhas, right, that one is going to prostrate to. So even though there's, like, let's say, if on your altar you have one Buddha, the mind, right, of the practice, like, if Lama Zopa Rinpoche is doing this, for example, right? He's there and he's visualizing infinite Buddhas in infinite directions, right? So it's not just in front, but all around. Right? Then he says, I'm sorry, it was all the victors, right? So all the victors means infinite. Then with as many bodies as all the atoms of the world. So imagine this, right? You imagine that you don't just have this one body, but you have an infinite number of bodies on an infinite number of, like, covering this entire planet and covering all the planets, right? And they're all going to prostrate. It's almost impossible, right? Can you imagine, like, is that foreign or is that familiar to you? To imagine, as you're doing something, imagining infinite emanations of yourself doing it, to infinite enlightened beings. Now, the third infinite, right, is you're doing that for infinite number of others. Right? Your motivation is, I'm doing this for infinite other sentient beings. And then I'm doing an infinite number of prostrations for infinite sentient beings. It's inconceivable, right? And if you read the prayer of good conduct, this prayer, it's totally like that. It's like totally mind-blowing. But okay, so that's what one is visualizing, right? So one is visualizing like that, prostrating with infinite bodies to infinite. And another thing, again, this is just like to get the mindset of this practice, the mindset of Mahayana Buddhism, really, which is what this is getting us into, is, so this is the teaching, and again, I'm not making this up, right, but, because it could seem so, like, I don't know if it's far out or something, but it's the teaching, so we're going through it. The commentary that says, that when you do one prostration like that, right, so, and we'll go through how to do a prostration in a sec, but that when you do one prostration and you go down on the floor and then come back up, they say that every atom from you, right, from where every atom your body covers, not just directly, but from there they call it all the way to the Vajra ground, right, which means like the center of the earth or something like that. They say, for that many lifetimes, you'll take rebirth as a wheel-turning king, which is like the highest kind of king in Indian mythology or something like that. Like, imagine that, right? How many atoms is that? Uncountable, right? Billions and billions and billions and billions of atoms, right? Like, what's there to say? Like, can you imagine anything that positive? Like, it's hard for us to even, like, imagine anything that positive, I think, isn't it? Like, you would say, oh, I can't do that. Me? No, I can't possibly. But that's what the teaching says. So, and you're dedicating all of that to others, is the idea. Okay, so then the actual physical part of prostration, let's go through that. So you take your two hands, right? And like in many traditions, when a prayer gesture is like this, but in Buddhism, you actually tuck your fingers, your thumb inside, and then close your hands around that. And there are two levels of symbolism to that. One is that you imagine that your prayer gesture is not empty, that inside is a wish-granting jewel. Okay. So that's one symbolism of this, is that your two thumbs symbolize the wish-granting jewel, which grants all wishes, and so that it sort of symbolizes your wishes for others, right? Your wishes of love and of compassion. And that, in a sense, that compassion and bodhicitta itself is the wish-granting jewel, right? It's what grants all wishes ultimately, because it grants enlightenment. So one level of symbolism of that is, and when you hold that at your heart, right, it's like a symbol of the wish-granting jewel of compassion and bodhicitta. That's one symbolism. The other symbolism is that when you do this, there's empty space. Like if you do that, it's like there's no space there. When you do this, there's empty space all around your thumb, right? And the idea is that empty space is a reminder or a symbol of emptiness, of the wisdom understanding emptiness. So just that part of the gesture has meaning, that's all. Does that make sense? There are other levels of meaning. You can also, it's up to you if you want to think, you don't have to think all this, but there's another level of meaning, which is my right hand symbolizes method, which is love, compassion, altruism, and bodhicitta. My left hand symbolizes wisdom, and as I bring them together, may my love and wisdom be inseparable. May there be inseparable compassion or love and wisdom in my mind. Does that make sense? That's another symbolism of just that gesture. Then there are actually there are also like Kensho Rinpoche in the Easy Path describes, there are also like, from a Vajrayana or a tantric perspective, there are other levels of symbolism just of the gesture. So it's amazing actually, just the gesture has like, you can actually go on for like, actually we could like spend a week just talking about the symbolism of that gesture. Really, you could actually. Which is like poetry in a way, right? Like, there's poetry you can go on, like it has so many levels of meaning or something. It's like that. And then, when doing a prostration, so you would stand up, right? You would make this gesture, you would do that visualization, right? And then there's a physical thing, which is, ordinarily you'll see where people do like this, that, and that. And the symbolism of that, I did it here, you'll see people doing that in front of the Dalai Lama, for example, or so on. And the symbolism of that gesture is related to this verse, that's why I'm going over it. So it symbolizes, may I purify my body, my speech, and my mind. Actually, and just that, right? One is sort of, through touching those 3 points, it's symbolizing purifying the body, speech, and mind. By the way, it's interesting, right? Buddhism is the same. Actually, I always think that's interesting. Buddhism is the same as many traditions in the sense of viewing the mind as ultimately seated here, right? There is oftentimes we say my mind, right? Think of the brain. But what there are various levels of meaning to that. But I remember Carl Jung was struck by that the first time he met Native Americans, and they said, he said, I'm a doctor of psychiatry, or whatever, of the mind, and they immediately all pointed here for the mind, and he was like, being a European, he said, oh, don't you point here? And they said, why would you point there? No, your mind, your mind is here. So Buddhism agrees with them in that sense. Like, not that the brain isn't here, but the point being, actually, in one sense, that the one is there are two ways. I think there are many levels of that, but one is when you feel really strong love and compassion. Where do you feel it? That's one point. Another point is, from Buddhist perspective, is the most subtle mind, the mind of clear light, the mind that manifests at the time of death, resides there. So that's another meaning in Buddhism. Why they point here. Actually, the ultimate meaning is that the most subtle level of consciousness abides in the heart chakra. So that's another reason. But okay. So when doing a prostration, we're doing that visualization. One touches those 3 points, which symbolizes purifying my body, speech, and mind. And then you, on the physical level, and now I want to go through different levels. Like, one is a full-length prostration, right? So having touched those 3 points is the thing where you would lay your full body out, right? Like with your hands out like this, on the ground. Then you get back up. Then there's the 5-point prostration, where it's just you don't go fully down. But I think I can't remember. I think I did the 5-point prostration when I did it. But so it's the 5 points being your 2 knees, your 2 hands, and your forehead, right? And then you get back up. And then for people who, sometimes even that, right, can be is a form of physical prostration, right? That's not listed, but traditionally it would be either the full length or the 5-point prostration. And Lama Zobrumshe jokes, because he said, when he was teaching on this, he joked, he said, but I don't think he was joking, he was saying that, the more atoms you cover, then the more merit you create, right? And so then he was joking, he was saying, so then if you have like long hair, falls out, that counts. And, sorry for that. He was joking, Lama Zobrumshe was joking like that. He was saying that, so if you have long hair, then more atoms, or like, so if you're taller, and then he was joking sometimes saying, well, then if you go up on the top floor, is that many more atoms? He was like, joking around. But anyway, so however many atoms your body covers from the prostration.
So can you wear like a big hat, like Usha's,
That's funny.
like,
Also, they got an unfair advantage. If you're in the Himalayas, it's a lot more atoms. If you're at sea level, it's fewer. Anyway. But okay, so the physical prostration is like that, right? It would be either the full length or the 5-point prostration. Then mental prostration. I'll just read the verse. On top of each atom are Buddhas equaling all atoms. Now, can you imagine that? On each atom are Buddhas equaling all atoms. Actually, there are many teachings like this. But I remember it made me think of in the Vilamakirti Sutra. It talks about things like this, right? Where it would say, okay, so on each atom are Buddhas equaling all atoms, and they don't shrink, and the atom doesn't get bigger. How do they fit? Right? Bob Thurman once asked that because he translated that. He said, how do they fit? Contemplate it, whatever. But this is the visualization, right? Can you imagine that? Like, I mean, again, is there any other? Have you ever heard of such? It's amazing, like visionary. Really, it's visionary, isn't it? And we're trying to cultivate it and just see, essentially experiment to see what happens in your mind if you try to cultivate that kind of vision. And then not only that, right, but they're residing amongst all the Buddhist children, means all the bodhisattvas are around them. In case that wasn't enough, right, that on each atom, there is many Buddhas is all the atoms, but then each Buddha has around them a whole bunch of bodhisattvas. Then it says, I visualize the entire sphere of phenomena, right, means the universe, right, as completely filled with victors, with Buddhas in this way, right? So imagine that vision, actually, right? Like, imagine that all the atoms of this room, right, including the atoms of your own body, are like that. Right? The atoms of the walls and the floor and of the, right? Like ordinarily we think, oh, the Buddha's there, right? But what this is getting at is that, I mean, this is actually getting at a very profound point, right? Which is that, you know, the Buddha himself said, he said, those who see me by my form see me not. The Buddha is the Dharmata. The Buddha is the truth.
Don't forget to include your own body in that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting. So it's, you know, it's creating a whole other vision of the reality we're in. Right? And I'll make another comment actually about this. I'm really not what I planned to do, but like, you know, I was going to say this, like, again, I'm just pointing out how radical this is, because I think it's easy to just read over a prayer and like go like, oh well, you know, I just read it and that's fine. But that's not what, you know, this is from the Buddha himself, right? So, and the Buddha's sharing something. First of all, the Buddha's sharing something here of the Buddha's vision, right, of reality. And I sometimes, now do you mind, I'm going off, this is my own reflection, I want to be clear, this is not from the commentaries, but, so this is my own personal reflection on this, is like, you know, in our culture, right, like, actually it's funny, like, if you go to I was thinking about this, like, literature or movies, right, it's really hard to think of much that's positive, actually, like, and oftentimes you'll see, like, a whole movie where, like, people hate each other, and then at the very end, they smile and hug, you know, and that's like, oh, it's heartwarming, right? There was something positive there, because we can only tolerate that much positivity in a way, you know, or if it starts off positive, right, where there's like a couple or a family or some friends who like each other, then there has to be, you know, in any film actually, it came from Aristotle, right? This idea there has to be conflict, right? So like, if it starts off where like two people are good friends and it's a movie, right? There's going to have to be a problem. They have to get into a fight, right, and dislike each other. And then by the end, they can come back together and say, "Oh, you're okay. You know, I don't hate you." Right? And then that's like the history of Western literature that's in our films and TV now, right? You know, and where it almost all falls apart. They kind of it has to. It's sort of the nature of our like way of imagining the world. That's my point. Whereas the literature and movies and all that are just reflect a way of imagining the world, right? Or sort of things seem terribly meaningless, and then maybe the person's, whatever, they're dying and they find one moment of meaning, and you say, phew, okay, they found one moment of meaning. Or they, you know, whatever, or like, you know, the person never loved anybody, and then they finally found love, and then they died. You say, oh, well, at least they loved somebody for 10 minutes, that's good. Like, and we say that's heartwarming, actually, right? My point is just, like, it's a kind of a pretty, so we say this, like, limited, let's say that, worldview, right? And what the Buddha is saying, the Buddha totally, I mean, the very first teaching of the Buddha, right, is there is suffering. So the Buddha doesn't deny suffering, right? But the Buddha faces that head on, and compassion requires us to face suffering, right? But what the Buddha is presenting here, and what Lama Tsongkhapa is presenting here, is that we can imagine things differently. And that we can also, it's almost like, I want to say this, I also think it's giving permission, actually, first of all, to cultivate a vastly positive mind, and to, let's say this, like, and also this vision is blissful. It doesn't say it doesn't use the word bliss, right, but this is a blissful vision, right? I mean, a universe filled where every atom is resonating with countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. It's a totally blissed out vision, right? And like, now actually at this point, Professor Bob Thurman talks about sometimes. He says, you know, like in the West, he jokes, he says that we pathologize bliss. So like if somebody's blissed out, we say like, maybe they need to get in the hospital. Let's get, somebody's blissed out, maybe we should take them to the hospital. He sort of jokes, or arrest them, maybe they took drugs, you know, we should put them in jail. And what he's getting at is that, what he's pointing out is that particularly this Mahayana Buddhist and Tibetan Buddhist vision and worldview is actually, I mean, it embraces and looks at suffering, right, with great compassion, but it also, creates space for and gives permission for a blissful approach to life, right? And I mean, if this is not blissful, what is, right? Like every atom filled with Buddhas, right? Like who are surrounded by bodhisattvas. I love that one, right? Every atom has as many Buddhas as all the atoms. Right? And each of those Buddhas is surrounded by bodhisattvas, right? And they're all teaching a blissful path of love and compassion. Like, even the atoms of the air, right? They're atoms, right? That's included, right? Like, and the water, right? The entire ocean is that. Can you imagine? Each atom of the ocean filled with that many Buddhas, right? It's an utterly blissful vision. And what this is saying is, it's giving you permission in a way, right? Like, it's giving you permission to totally be blissed out. So I think that's good. We need that. So anyway, that was my personal reflection. Okay, so in brief here, though, what Lama Tsongkhapa says below, on each Madhuratam, circled by bodhisattvas, then he says you should generate appreciation that recollects their positive qualities. And what it's saying here is that mental prostration is that appreciation or respect, right? It's like, so it's appreciating the good qualities of the Buddha. And again, what does that mean, actually? You know, actually, like their whole, like, you know, of those, now I was going back to those earlier, those masters, right, of Nalanda tradition. There are huge texts that they wrote about the qualities of a Buddha. And so if your mental prostration means recollecting or bringing to mind the positive qualities of a Buddha, right? And it said, actually, again, when it enters those texts, say, the positive qualities of a Buddha are infinite, right? So we can't really, our mind can't actually conceive of them, but that we can conceive of some aspects of them. Actually, in one text, the Maitreya's Abhisamaya Alankara, it's like the ornament for clear realizations. He points out, which I thought was very interesting, is he says, actually, because the qualities of a Buddha, Maitreya, who's himself enlightened, right, this is Maitreya's statue, he says, because the qualities of Buddhahood are inconceivable, he says, then one, he teaches this way, the Abhisamaya Alankara, he says, the qualities of the Bodhisattva as they approach Buddhahood are incredibly vast, right? Then he says, so we can study those qualities and then recognize that the Buddha has those qualities only more so. You know, and as the Bodhisattva gets closer and closer to enlightenment, they get more and more like amazing, vast, like incredible qualities, right? And so Maitreya sort of teaches, in this text, he kind of teaches what those qualities are as a way of, and like, so you read the qualities of like these bodhisattvas, and then you say, like, that's almost inconceivable, and yet I'm conceiving of it. And then a Buddha has those only more so, which is actually inconceivable, but I'm getting closer to conceiving it, or something like that. And again, this is like getting at, again, it may seem very simple, right? If you just read this line, you should generate appreciation that recollects their positive qualities, you could just think, okay, Buddha's really great, let's move on, right? But I'm just pointing out, this is a vast topic, actually. You could just, you know, so one form of mental prostration is you could just like, if you're just like, I mean, you can do it when you're prostrated, of course, but even if you just lay around thinking, right? Like, that's mental prostration. If you're just like, when you come home from work, instead of watching something like violent or whatever, if you just like lay around and think, like, what are the, if you study a text like that, right, then you can contemplate, it's like, what are the qualities of enlightenment, right? Like, and you start contemplating what those are, then that could be a form of mental prostration, right? Like, and sort of the more inspiration you get, and the more, oh, and one more point I was going to make is, because also one thing that, as we go through this whole text, I think, and again, now I always try to clarify that, this is just my own reflection again, for a moment, it's not in the traditional commentaries, but one thing we're doing, again, with this vastness of mind, is, you'll see, because there are going to be points where we're going to empathize with the experience of hell beings and hungry ghosts, and horrific, the most horrific states imaginable, actually. And then also we try to empathize with the most exalted states imaginable. Right? And ordinarily, like, our range is very small. Right? We just, like, it's hard, like, actually, for many of us, it's hard to even, like, we don't even want to empathize with, like, something a little outside. Actually, it's like social psychologists who study that, right? People find it really easy to empathize with other people's experiences when it's just like my own. The more similar it is to mine, then it's really easy to empathize with it. And one thing that, if we want to have compassion, right, one thing that Buddhism is suggesting is, like, which all these contemplations are going to do for sure. If you keep going with if you keep studying this with us, you know, if you keep doing the Lam Rim, you'll see it's like you're pushing the limits of your empathy further and further. Right? And so this part, actually, you know, later we're going to empathize with the worst sufferings, because that's you have to do that to have compassion, right? But here we're trying to if empathy means understanding the experience of the other, right? This means, when you say you should generate appreciation of excellent, their positive qualities, it means you have to open your mind enough to imagine what might those be. Right? What might the positive qualities be of the enlightened state? Anyway, so that's that. Then the third one is verbal prostration. And I'll just read that one verse here. With oceans of inexhaustible, and again the vastness notice, right? Oceans of inexhaustible eulogies to you. A great roar from the oceans of melody-emitting organs. So what that means, this second line, is that now you imagine, remember you imagined infinite bodies that were prostrating? So now you imagine those infinite bodies, what it says, melody-emitting organs, that's their tongues, right? So it means those infinite bodies that you just visualized earlier, they all have a mouth, right? And so they're all together now. Imagine this, right? You visualized yourself with as many bodies as the atoms of the universe, right? And now you're imagining that all those infinite bodies together are singing praises of the Buddha, of enlightenment. Again, like, so can you imagine a universe where an infinite number of melody-emitting organs, tongues, are singing together about enlightenment? That's the idea there. And it says, I express the marvelous qualities of all the victors and praise all of you gone to bliss. So one quality of the Buddha is one who's gone to bliss. It means that, like in Sanskrit they say sugata, and sukha is bliss or happiness, right? So sugata is one who's gone to bliss, right? Gone to happiness. Like where the Buddha, like I mean, actually, I didn't really get into what are the qualities of the Buddha, right? But one quality of the Buddha is like, actually, I'll just share that one point. Lama Yeshe also, I think it's an Introduction to Tantra, he says this. He says, let's say this. He points out, he says, if you practice, actually what he says is this, he says, if you practice Zen, actually, is I think what he talks about, correctly, right? He says there will come a point where you're, whatever happens to you, you feel a sense of, I think the word is like a sense of tranquility or something. So if somebody gives you a gift, you feel tranquility, and if somebody insults you, you feel tranquility. And he says, if you practice Vajrayana, right, the Vajrayana Buddhism, he says, then you reach a point, if you succeed in that practice, where whatever happens, you feel transcendental, simultaneously born exalted bliss combined with emptiness, wisdom. So he says, like, so if somebody gives you an apple, or if somebody like punches you in the nose, either way, your subjective experience is bliss, transcendental bliss. So that when it says gone to bliss, it means somebody who succeeded in that practice, right? So even when somebody, like they say the Buddha, right? That's why, actually sometimes they say this thing like the Buddha has equal, so if somebody like comes to the Buddha and gives the Buddha a present, versus somebody comes to the Buddha and tries to kill the Buddha. First of all, the Buddha's subjective experience is still bliss. And then the Buddha's experience of the other is equal compassion, right? For us, if somebody gives us a gift, we like them, or if somebody even like is slightly just looks funny at us, we don't like them. Whereas the Buddha is completely different. Part of that is the Buddha's compassion is equal for all. But part of that is also the Buddha is gone to bliss, right? So in other words, the Buddha doesn't have anything to protect in that sense, or defend against, or defend. So the Buddha is capable of blissfully embracing all beings. Okay, this time, should I pause there? So we prostrate, so in other words, in terms of just to finalize with prostration, right? So one thing is that we're purifying our body, speech, and mind through this gesture, but also the idea is we're engaging our body, speech, and mind in the process of prostration, right? By doing these things, by literally, thinking of the good qualities of the enlightened beings, physically prostrating, and verbally reciting some kind of prayer, while visualizing and imagining the entire universe filled with emanations singing praises of the Buddhas. Any questions up to this point before we go on?
So you say like physical prostration, you think about infinite Buddhas, and then if you myself, and then if you want, there are 4 things.
Oh yeah, Khenpo Rinpoche taught 4 infinites,
Uh-huh.
which is great. I love that. the first infant was infinite Buddhas, right, that you're prostrating to, you know.
Yeah.
The second one is infinite bodies, right, so you're emanating infinite bodies, which is here in this, but then the third infinite is you're doing it for an infinite number of sentient beings, right? You're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it to be of service and love and help and enlightenment, you know, for the enlightenment of all sentient beings, which is an infinite number of sentient beings. And the fourth infinite is you imagine that that you do infinite prostrations. You can see how in that way, of course, then you're creating because also remember this actually, you know, again, it's implicit in this, is that karma, right, merit, right, which is a form, is positive karma in a way, is all karma actually is determined by the mind, by the motivation, right. In other words, so like in other words, a negative action, right. We said that we said that before. When we get to the section on karma, you'll see in this text actually. What makes a karma negative is that it's done with out of a negative motivation like anger or hatred, craving, grasping, ignorance, and so on. And the strength of that mind determines how powerful the karma is in part. That's one of the factors that determines the power of karma, is the power of your, in those cases, negative motivation. And then also the object. You know, there are various things that make a karma more powerful. One is your motivation, the other is who you're doing it to, the other is how you do it, and so on. Here, you know, through these four infinites, for example, right? Part of this, what's happening, is we're then creating infinite positive karma. So in one way, it looks very simple. The person's just one, let's say this is one person doing 3 prostrations, right? But if they're doing it in this way, right, because of the power of the mind, the karma is infinite, actually. So that's the reason for the 4 infinites. Well, that's one reason. Okay, so then, any other questions?
Yeah. Is there like a good time to do prostration? Like I've seen where before you receive teaching, or but is there like times where you want to do it versus just random?
Yeah, there like one is I mean what's it say like traditionally, I guess, or something, you know, like when one particularly it's like if you know, if one is going like let's just say this, you know, ordinarily we're visualizing all the Buddhas inseparable from our teacher, right, or Lama, or Guru, or something. But so traditionally, if you're going to where your Guru is to receive teachings, like, you know, so like, you know, if you're there with like a great Lama, then, you know, traditionally at the beginning of the teaching, people offer 3 prostrations. That is traditional. Yeah, and then also, you know, like a lot of times if somebody goes to like a very holy place, you know, like a pilgrimage or something, then many times you'll see where like people will offer prostrations. So if somebody goes to like Bodh Gaya, to the stupa there, most people go offer prostrations there and so on. And then, but like, say it, then according to the Lamrim tradition, those are good. I mean, anytime you do 1, 2 prostrations is good. But then in the Lamrim tradition, particularly, what they suggest is really each time you're going to engage in a meditation session, to do a few prostrations. You can do, I mean, do as many as you want. So sometimes a person might do just 3, or something like you know, I actually, there are many, you know, what's the way to say it? Like, actually, I'll share that, like, I think it's okay to say this out loud. Like, one thing that struck me was that, I think, Ken Rinpoche, for example, who's like, must be around 80, I think every morning he does 100 before he meditates. You know? A friend of mine, a Tibetan friend of mine, I think her mom's close to 90 now or something. Well, she's well in at least 85. And she also, I was like embarrassed a little bit because she's like over about at least 85, and she goes out on a board and prostrates to there's a cave and a hill where her guru, who's passed away, used to live. Like, he meditated in that cave. And she still does 100 every day to the cave of her guru. So, you know, so anytime. In other words, then, you know, and then like I said last time, in all the different Tibetan traditions, there's this tradition of doing the nundro, like doing the preliminary practices. And that's where sometimes, it's all Tibetan, all practitioners, all lineages of Tibetan Buddhism have this tradition of sometimes a person who feels like, you don't have to do this, but some people like decide, I'm going to go to 100,000 prostrations or something. But one thing I liked is that, I said this last time, like, really that's just learning how to prostrate correctly. Like, actually, if a person decides to do that, sometimes people think, oh, I'm gonna do 100,000, then I'm done, you know. I think really, and I think I'm correct on this, I'm certain. The real reason people do 100,000 is that it's really hard to visualize all these things, right? Like to imagine infinite bodies and infinite voices and infinite Buddhas. And so to me, it's like, if a person does that, it's because like, I really want to get good at doing them. I want to learn how to do this vast visualization. So if a person does a retreat, let's say, or something, and does 100,000, then it's like, at the end of 100,000, they're like, now I really know how to prostrate. Now I can start my daily practice of prostration. That's the correct way. If somebody ever decides to do the Nindra, I think that's the correct way to do it, is to say, you know, I want to learn how to do this properly, so I'll do 100,000 just to practice. And then I'll like really be ready to practice it.
Which reminds me, one time I had an audience with Khyentse Rinpoche, back when Bouchon was here.
Mm.
So at the beginning of the thing, I did my prostrations, 3 prostrations. And at the end, I started to do 3 prostrations again. And he said no. And I don't remember why.
Yeah, there's some tradition of like, there's some, this is like, I don't know if it's valid or not, but there's some idea that when departing from your guru, like on the last day of a series of teachings, or if you're leaving or something like that, there's some idea or tradition to not prostrate, in the sense of like for auspiciousness to prostrate next time, like sort of not having an ending. It's similar to, there's a tradition with if teacher and student are going to be parted for a long time, or if the teacher's about to pass away or something, sometimes the teacher won't finish the teaching. They'll leave a teaching undone, with creating a kind of karmic connection to meet again to finish it, kind of thing. I think it's similar to that. There's some idea of like not finalizing or not.
Maybe that's why Lama's Open Rinpoche never finishes.
Yeah, no, right. Maybe so. Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments or questions on those first couple parts? Okay. So the next limb after prostration is offerings. Let me have time to do that. So Lama Tsongkhapa on page 30 says there are 2 kinds of offerings: surpassable and unsurpassable. And the implication here is best to make both. But so, and then I'll read again, because I'll read the 2 verses. So, surpassable offerings first, and again, this is from the Prayer of Good Conduct, or the King of Prayers. So again, this is what we're offering, right? Delightful flowers and heavenly garlands, musical instruments, scented unguents, and sublime parasols, radiant lights and sublime incense I offer to you, the victors. The finest garments and supreme scents, vessels of powder equaling Mount Meru, and that's like scented powders, like sandalwood or those different kinds. All wondrous offerings in a spectacular array I offer to you, the victors. And so Mount Meru would be like basically the largest mountain in the world, right? In Tibetan sort of cosmology, or not in Buddhist rather cosmology, it'd be sort of the central axis mountain, or the largest mountain. So it'd be like, so basically what this is saying is offerings is piled as high as the Himalayas. They're the biggest mountains on the planet. And so here, what one is doing, right, is one is visualizing making these kinds of offerings, right? And again, so this is like an easy, actually, it's an easy practice to do. And I want to point out something. What this is saying is at the beginning of our meditation, right? So you sat down to meditate, right? So first you did your however many you wanted prostrations, and then you're still visualizing the merit field, right? And then you might read this verse. You're reading the verses, for example, or verses like this, right? And so you imagine, you visualize offering, skies and Himalaya mountain-sized piles of these kinds of offerings, right? And again, so you're getting this idea of the vast visionary quality of this, right? Like so just the flowers, right? Like so, and sometimes in the commentaries they describe this, like, so you're imagining like, what's it we say it, like a universe filled with flowering trees and with individual flowers and with bouquets of flowers and with garlands of flowers, right? And you're imagining like, offering all of those to enlightened beings, right? And the same with, musical instruments, right? Like you don't just imagine somebody playing guitar, right? You can imagine like symphonies and bands and whatever, any kind of music you like, right? But like filling all of space. Right? Again, it's this like very visionary practice. And so the idea is that you visualize that as vastly as possible. And in that way, it's creating, again, your motivation is love and compassion and devotion also to the enlightenment, and to enlightened beings and to your teachers and so on. But so you imagine, you visualize here incredibly vast offerings. And again, if you have, you can make offerings on your altar as much as you want, but here you imagine much, much more vast than that. Does that make sense? You imagine just like, Himalayan size, the skies filled with, you can imagine like skies filled with offering gods and goddesses sort of pouring down all these different all these different blissful offerings to enlightened beings. And again, you're still visualizing them filling all of space, right? And one other point here is that this is, it says here, there's a line here, it says, vessels, in the last two lines, the second to last line of that verse, it says, all wondrous offerings in a spectacular array. So what that implies, just to be clear, is that then you can also include now at this point anything else you think is fun to offer, beautiful, wonderful, right? So you can, you can offer like, it's not mentioned there, right? But you can offer like, billions of precious gems and beautiful, what's the word, lights and like, fireworks displays and whatever, I don't know, whatever's like beautiful to you. You can offer, mansions and flying carpets and wish-granting jewels, right? Actually, I just think that like Tibetans offer oftentimes from Indian imagery, like so they'll offer like wish-granting jewels and wish-granting trees and wish-granting, there are all these kind of things like that in Indian stories. But now at this point, I do think it's fine to offer like, there are lots of things like that, right? What's it called in Western culture? The Philosopher's Stone or whatever, all these different, like, you can, whatever you want to offer, that's fine. Because the more you offer, it's just mental, right? It's like creating karma of offering whatever you think is beautiful and precious and wonderful. And one point here is also you can include here, and it is good to include, actually it's very helpful at this point. I just want, this is not my comment, this comes from Lamas. It's really good also to, at this point, offer what you actually have, and especially anything you tend to grasp at too much, to decrease your own grasping. And it's really helpful, actually. Like, if you practice, first of all, offer the visualize thing, right? But like, let's say this, like, if you think, like, let's say your house, right? Like ordinarily we grasp, like, this is my place. Right? It's very helpful in this offering section to say, I offer my house, right, to all the enlightened beings for the sake of all sentient beings. So then actually, your mind starts to relax. Okay, my house is not my house. Actually, it's not really your house anyway, right? Like somebody else had it before, somebody else is going to have it later. Actually, you're just even if you own it, you're just a tenant, actually. Right? And really, if your motivation is, I have this house for the sake of all beings, right? As a place to host others, as a place to practice compassion for others, as a place to be of kindness to others. And so I'm just using it for now, for others, as like a temporary place. And my car, it's not my car, right? It's all sentient beings' car. I have it right now and I'm using it to get places to help, to study Dharma and to help people. And I need to use it for that purpose, but it's not mine. That way then if somebody scratches it, you don't freak out as much, because it's not really yours anyway. Actually, it's not, right? Somebody else made it, and somebody else is going to have it later. You just have it temporarily. Right? So offering even the things you cherish, right? Your clothes, your food, your refrigerator, anything you grasp at is really good to offer it. Does that make sense, kind of? Psychologically, it's very helpful. It's sort of relaxing our tightness and our attachment. then unsurpassable offerings. So now here it says, it's still on page 30, there's the verse, offerings unsurpassable and vast, visualized for all the victors. By the power of my faith and good conduct, I prostrate and offer them to all the victors. And Lama Tsongkhapa here says, since surpassable offerings are the offerings of worldly beings, this here is everything good that is emanated by powerful beings such as bodhisattvas. And what I wanted to do there is just to clarify, so surpassable offerings, right, means anything in the universe, any ordinary thing in the universe, right? And that can include, for example, if you're driving down the freeway and you see flowers, like a field of wildflowers, that's a surpassable offering. Offer it, right? You can say, I offer that, I offer that to all the Buddhas. Your own house is a surpassable offering. It's an ordinary, so it's the ordinary object of an ordinary being's perception. That's a surpassable offering. And it doesn't mean it's bad to offer it. It means it's good to offer it, right? But it's surpassable in the sense that it's still the object of as Lama Tsongkhapa says here, what's the word he uses? Worldly beings, right? So it means like ordinary sentient creatures like ourselves, right? So offering all the things all the enjoyments of ordinary sentient creatures like myself, I offer, right? So a car, house, and so on. Well, I wanted to, in the easy path, Khenchen Rinpoche, elaborates on this unsurpassable offering idea. And so what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying is unsurpassable offerings, what he says, right, means that they are the offerings made by enlightened beings. And so, so he only says it fairly briefly, but I thought to just elaborate slightly, because it's not mentioned there in detail, what Khenchen Rinpoche says, to elaborate on it. And so he says, in terms of enlightened beings, he gives the example of Samantabhadra, who actually, first of all, is a bodhisattva, so that so it can be included in what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, right? But among the 8 great bodhisattvas who are close to the Buddha, Samantabhadra was particularly well known for making very extensive offerings, for making visionary, all kinds of visionary, extensive offerings. Also, actually, the prayer that we've been reading, the prayer of good conduct, is an expression of Samantabhadra, in a sense. So it's related to Samantabhadra. And so there are various different meanings of unsurpassable offerings, but I'll just go through a few of them. One version of what Khenchen Rinpoche called here unsurpassable Samantabhadra offerings. I'll just describe it. So you visualize yourself as Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, holding. Remember we had this thing with the gesture. So you imagine yourself as Samantabhadra holding a wish-granting jewel at your heart. Light radiates from all of your pores, right? Imagine, now again, we're getting visionary again, right? How many pores does your body have, right? So from every pore, light rays start radiating outward. And on the tip of each light ray is a Samantabhadra, again holding a wish-granting jewel at his heart. And then from all of that Samantabhadra's pores, light rays radiate, and each of those light rays has Samantabhadra. And from each of those, and so on. Until the entire expanse of space is filled with Samantabhadras, these blue bodhisattvas, all holding wish-granting gems, all radiating light. Again, can you imagine, like, it's hard to imagine, maybe, at the beginning, right? But it's like an incredibly visionary visualization, right? And then you imagine light rays emanating from all of those different wish-granting jewels, right? So there's an infinite now number of Samantabhadras who are all kind of made of light, filling the expanse of space. They're all holding these wish-granting jewels, and then from each of their wish-granting jewels come the offerings, right? So now there's an infinite number of Samantabhadras, so then when you want to visualize flowers, you imagine that this is the unsurpassable, right? Is that from all those wish-granting jewels, all kinds of flowers start radiating out, filling the universe, right? When you want to offer incense, it's like this kind of pure blissful incense sort of starts wafting out of the wish-granting jewel. When you want to offer parasols, then parasols manifest from wish granting jewels. When you want to offer, gems, then gems manifest. When you want to offer beautiful clothing, then that sort of manifests, and so on. Quite a beautiful visualization, right? So that's one visualization. Then there are a few other visualizations that I'll just mention briefly. Another one that's an unsurpassable. Khenchen Rinpoche says, since bodhisattva, any offering made by a bodhisattva is unsurpassable. Khenchen Rinpoche says, then if you, that Samantabhadra can also in this sense refer to bodhicitta. So if you cultivate a strong sense of bodhicitta and then make offerings, that bodhicitta itself makes your offering unsurpassable. That's another way of doing an unsurpassable offering. And then a few more ways of making unsurpassable offerings. Another one is, we said earlier that the highest offering is the offering of practice, right? When we were covering the section on the teacher, we said the best offering to the teacher is to practice the Dharma. And so one thing Khenchen Rinpoche here says is, so actually, if you practice Dharma, right, that's also an unsurpassable offering. And he gives the example even, Khenchen Rinpoche. He says, even something as simple as, the instruction of making water bowls or sweeping your room, before you meditate, cleaning your area. If you think of that, you say, that was my practice. I was actually practicing. That was the instruction of the Buddha. I practiced that instruction. Now I offer that. That's an unsurpassable offering because you're actually offering your practice. So it doesn't have to be, in that sense, like practice doesn't have to mean I realized, the ultimate nature of mind in my deep meditation. Anything that's a sincere, genuine Dharma practice, if you offer that, that's an unsurpassable offering. Another one, I'm just like, this is fun. Right?
So do you have to say that you offer the practice?
Yeah.
You have to say it?
You think it, yeah.
Okay, without think about it, you're not offering it.
Yeah, you're just doing the practice.
So if you finish, let's say you do a practice, you read and then you say, offer the practice.
Yeah, that's an unsurpassable offering.
But if you don't say it, you don't offer it.
And you didn't offer it,
Okay.
you just did it.
All right, sure. Yeah.
And then two more ways of making unsurpassable offerings. One is, this is how to offer also. This is a detail of how to offer your practice. One thing actually just is, I want to go through different ways of offering your practice. One way of offering your practice, which you can't do very often, but every now and then you can, is actually if you've done a lot of Dharma practice, one thing you can do that's very meaningful is actually to write a letter to your teacher, actually saying, this is my offering of practice. It's actually traditional. So if you've done a significant, let's say you've done something that you feel is really meaningful to you in terms of really practicing Dharma, you can go personally or write a letter to your teacher and say, now I want to offer my practice. I did this and that and this, and that's my sincere effort, my real sincere practice of Dharma, and I'm offering that to you. And that's a traditional, actually people don't always do that. Some people don't know to do that, but it's traditional, and it creates a positive karma of doing that. That's one way. Then another way, just in daily practice, there are two visualizations I want to mention. One is, so if you think of all your Dharma practices, right, all the good things you've done, all the love, all the compassion, all the meditation, all the preliminary practices, all the study, all that, then you can visualize, it's actually a practice, which is an unsurpassable Dharma practice, unsurpassable offering practice, where you visualize those practices and you imagine them taking the form. It can be the form of jewels, like you can imagine like them taking the form of wish-granting jewels, and diamonds, and rubies, and sapphires, and emeralds, and so on. Or, I wanted to read this verse in the Guru Puja, which I mentioned earlier, the Guru Puja merit field we did, right? In the Guru Puja, there's a verse, which I'll just read because it's an example of this. This is the Panchen Lama, him making a verse of offering your practice in the form of visualization. To please you, O Venerable Gurus, we offer these objects, both actually arranged and those envisioned, as a pleasure grove on the shore of a wish-granting sea. It is strewn with 1,000-petaled lotuses captivating the hearts of all. These are the offering objects arising from samsara and nirvana's white virtues. Everywhere is dotted with flowers. These are the virtues of the three gateways of ourselves and others in this world and beyond. It is diffused with the myriad fragrances of Samantabhadra offerings, and is laden with fruit, the 3 trainings, 2 stages, and 5 paths. And so that's just a verse, of describing this, but so you can imagine your own Dharma practices, both the practices themselves, the good karma that comes from them, and the eventual fruits of them, right? Which is like the 2 stages and the 5 paths, or the eventual ripened fruits of your Dharma practice, the realizations. And you can imagine those taking the form of jewels, or he imagines them much more extensively as a wish-granting sea and filled with fragrances like Samantabhadra, and he offers that. Okay, so that's another way of doing unsurpassable offering. And then the last one, I'll just mention it briefly, comes from Vajrayana, or Tantric Buddhism. And there, and I'll just read, Khenpo Rinpoche says, there, Samantabhadra offering, in this sense, would refer to the union of the wisdom of great bliss and emptiness. And so then he says, actually in Tantric practice, all offerings are thought of as being of the nature of great bliss and emptiness. And then they take the aspect of various objects of offering. But their function is to give rise to the pristine awareness of the single taste of great bliss and emptiness united. So that's another, so anytime where you make an offering and if you're practicing Vajrayana, and you contemplate or think that the nature of that is the transcendental great bliss, simultaneous great bliss, or what do you say, innate great bliss, realizing emptiness, and that's what it gives rise to. So this flower gives rise to the experience of innate great bliss, understanding emptiness. That's also an unsurpassable offering. So there are lots of different kinds of unsurpassable offerings too. And actually, if you think of that, then you can take if you think of that, for example, then all your surpassable offerings become unsurpassable. Right? If you think of it, whereas if you just think I'm offering a flower, that's good, that's merit, right? But that's surpassable. If you think that flower is giving rise to the experience of transcendental great bliss, realizing emptiness, well then that same flower becomes an unsurpassable offering because of your mind. Right? So that's the main thing. So any questions about that section?
So do you offer the mind too? Can you offer your mind?
Offer your
Your
mind.
brain, like, your mind, or whatever.
Well, actually, there's a teaching like Milarepa. When he went to, when Milarepa went to Marpa, when he met Marpa, right, he was broke. He had nothing, right? And so he went to Marpa, right, and he said, basically, I don't have anything. Like, I have nothing, no objects to offer you. And then he said, but I offer you my body, my speech, and my mind. Yeah. And that worked very well for him. It really worked out well, because he became enlightened in one life. So yeah, you can offer your body, speech, and mind. And that's a traditional offering too, actually, to offer your body, speech, and mind. Which means, in a way, right? Which means if you offer that, it means it means you're saying I'll practice. Then I completely will dedicate myself to practicing Dharma. Right? That's what it means. I won't. In other words, it means I'm giving up self-centeredness, right? I'm not. In other words, that means if I give, because actually, if you offer your body, speech, and mind to the Buddha, that means, what does it mean, right? It means you'll totally dedicate yourself to helping others, right? And to not being selfish, and to practicing, and to, sincerely giving everything to your practice, right? So it's a great offering. Yeah, that's the best offering.
Yeah. And what about me?
You're nervous about that one.
Yeah. Well,
But it's a good offering. Yeah.
Can you offer like a suffering, like if you're experiencing a suffering? Is that also an offering?
Yeah, in these, in this section, for the Lamrim part of the preliminary, they mainly describe, like offering objects of enjoyment is what's right, the flowers and incense and so on. So in this, that's not mentioned here, but yes, you can. There's like you can offer everything actually in a way. So it's okay. And then last thing here is it says so we're starting to page 31. It says the last 2 lines are should be enjoyed with all the previous sets, 2 in order to complete them. So what that's getting at is the last 2 lines of that last prayer. By the power of my faith and good conduct, I prostrate and offer them to all the victors. Right? It's saying that also applies to the prostrations. That applies to every, right? In other words, that it's out of faith and seeing the good qualities of the Buddhas, and that you know, that we're doing all of those practices with faith, which was mentioned earlier in the previous section about in relation to the teacher. Let's see. Let's do one, just one more limb today. Because I think that's all we have time for, yeah. So we'll do confession. And again, I'll just read the verse. Confession of negativity. Actually, just to be clear, so the other ones that we've done so far, right, like offering and prostration, are mainly to create merit or positive karma. Confession of the 7 limbs is the one that's specifically focused on purifying our negativity. Okay? And so that's what it says here. Confession of negativities is set forth in a single stanza. It says, whatever negativity I have done with my body, speech, and likewise my mind, overwhelmed by attachment, anger, and ignorance, all of these I confess one by one before you. And in one way, I mean, that's, in one way, that's also related to your question about offering, is offering our suffering in a way is related to this too, because it's related to our negativity in a sense. And so in that sense, we're confessing that, or we're opening up to that, we're, you know, sharing that, giving that, telling the Buddha about it. And so here, Lama Tsongkhapa says, in dependence upon the cause, the 3 poisons, and the means, the 3 bases. So what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying here is, what does it mean, right, our negativities, right? And so he's saying, basically, the 3 poisons are the root of all of our negativity. So what are the 3 poisons? One is anger, or hatred, or aggression. Another is like desire, or craving, or grasping, you know, that kind of feeling. And the third is ignorance, right? And just that's a categorization, actually, right? Because then, according to Buddhist psychology, those 3 are sort of the 3 root delusions, right, that give rise to negativities. And then from those, right, you can kind of elaborate out. So like, there are a list of like, there are various lengths of lists of negativities, so like 20 and 50 and 80, they go up to 84,000 negativities, but they can all be sort of traced back to those 3. So, you know, so like, for example, you know, those lead to, you know, jealousy and, you know, what's it called, pride and arrogance and, you know, what's the word, like, all the other, you know, all the, you know, like, for example, we say, you know, desire, right? Well, greed is one form of desire, you know, or something like that. So like, there are different, you know, they elaborate out to other delusions, right? But so what this is saying is all of our negativities come from those afflictive emotions, actually, those negative states of mind. Or that's the definition of a negativity, of a negative karma. Nagarjuna says, right, he said, there's a verse like this, where he says, you know, anything, all actions done out of, you know, anger, desire, and ignorance give rise to suffering results. All actions done without any, free from any desire, anger, or ignorance, don't give rise to suffering. You know, give rise to happiness. So it means all of our negativities are grounded in those poisons. It means inner poisons, right? Afflictive emotions, negative states of mind. And then by means of the 3 bases or 3 doors, right? So what it's saying is, out of those negative afflicted states of mind, right? Like hatred or something, or craving, you know, then with our body, our speech, or our mind, we do things, right? So it could be, you know, and this is getting at negative karma, right? So a negative karma could be, you know, it could be that if out of hatred for somebody you insult them, that's a negative karma, right? But also it's a negative action for you, even if you don't directly affect them. If you're just sitting in your house thinking, I hate this person, I hate them for this reason, I hate them for that reason, I hate them because of this, that's also a poison, right? It's a poison in your mind. It's an afflicted state of mind that gives rise to only suffering, right? And so what this is saying is, you know, so it could be, you know, so the action could be physical, like hitting them, right? It could be verbal, like insulting them, or it could just be mental, right? Sitting alone in your room thinking hateful thoughts. But any of those 3 will give rise to suffering, right? And then here it says, actually create. And then it lists other ways of creating negative karma that we're confessing. So one is any action of our body, or our speech, or our mind, like that, right? That's motivated by those. Then it gives other things. It says that I have made others create, right? Which actually in some ways is almost worse, right? So that would be like, actually we do that though sometimes. You know, like, I mean, in the extreme, right? Like the example they sometimes give is a president who sends people out to war to kill, right? So the president didn't kill anybody directly, but if the president, or a general, or whoever, if they say, go kill so-and-so, or go invade that country and kill, and then, actually if they send, 100,000 soldiers and they kill 600,000 people, it said that the person who sent them creates the karma of killing all 600,000. Whereas the soldier who killed one person creates the karma of killing one person. The person who told them to do it and ordered them to do it creates the karma of killing all of those people. But also, we do that also in our normal lives sometimes. Like, for example, so if you say something to somebody that makes them mad at somebody else, like you don't like somebody, right? So you say, oh, you know what's bad about them? They do this, they do that. And then you inspire that person to really hate that other person, right? That's that, right? Or if you say to the person like, oh, when we go in there, let's be whatever, like this to them, we don't like them, and then they join you in doing that, right? That's that, right? And actually, that's worse in a way, because now you're creating bad karma, right? And you're also you're also inspiring them to create bad karma. So you're doubling you're creating worse suffering in a way, right? So where it says, made others create, so it could mean ordering them to create it. It could mean, like, what's there to say? Like hiring somebody to do something negative, right? Paying them, that'd be an example of that, right? Like, so you pay somebody to do a negative action. And another example of that would be, like if you're in charge, like so a boss telling their employee, or a parent telling their child to do something negative, right? And that happens all the time. Like, so for example, I mean, again, from a Buddhist point of view, like, so, like for example, saying, we're gonna, whatever. There are lots of examples, right? We're gonna get even with our enemies. We're gonna go and,
Like Hitler sends soldiers to go kill.
Yeah.
So he's like, he gets all
the karma. Yeah, and so if that's true though. So if you're a boss and you have your team do something negative, you create, each of them gets some bad karma, but you create the karma of, it's not just the king or something, right? If you're the boss of somebody and you have all your team of employees do something negative, you get the karma of all the bad action. Or if you're if you're deciding for your family something, right? Like, so you have a group, like a family group, and you make the decision, we're going to do this, and it's a negative thing, you create the karma of all that negativity.
So looking at this from the viewpoint of desire, I mean, it's easy to do it with hatred.
Yeah.
But if I induce you to make a cheesecake, and you get all these other people to love cheesecake and eat cheesecake, that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, that's true. So we have to be careful. So yeah, it depends on the motivation, right? Motivation in relation to the cheesecake. Yeah, because if you do it out of generosity, like you say, oh, our family members coming, I really want you to make cheesecake because they'll be so happy. I don't really want any, but, make them happy.
Remember that one.
And there's a third one which they mention here, which is rejoicing in those created by others. And that's important, actually, so I just want to mention what it means. Is we're going to get into later positive rejoicing. Right? So in other words, what actions you rejoice in, you create karma in relation to. So if you rejoice in the positive actions of somebody, like if somebody, like if you see somebody helping somebody else and you think, that's wonderful, right? You create, you in yourself, because it's a mental action, you create some positive karma from that. And we're going to get into more about that later. But here they're talking about negative rejoicing, which is very easy to do, so I just want to mention it. And that's like, so we say this, like, actually, Lama's Overshape points out, watching the news is very dangerous for this one. And the point there being, like, let's say you're, you're American, right? And America is bombing another country. And you're watching the news, right? And you say, and America's winning, right? And you say, oh, that's great, right? But meanwhile, there are people dying, right? Like there are people being killed, children blown up and so, right? Then you're rejoicing in an action that's killing children, right? That's a heavy negative karma. That's what they're saying there, right? same thing, like if, like if you don't like somebody, right? And then somebody else, this could happen very easily, right? You're at work or you're somewhere, or in your family thing, right? You're with a large group, right? And you don't like person A, right? And then person B says something that makes them feel terrible. And you think, good job, or something. Person B, good job. You think it. You don't do anything, but you just think, oh, that was awesome. Right? That's negative karma. Right? That's negative rejoicing. Right? It's rejoicing in somebody being harmed. That's the point. Right? So it's really easy to do in those two situations. One is in large groups, right, where if you don't like somebody. But the other is watching TV, actually, watching the news, listening to the news, reading the paper. Because where there's a sense of us and them, right? And so it's like, or even like if it's not your own country, right? Like, but let's say you think, a certain, you don't like a certain group of people for some reason, right? And then something bad happens to them, and you think, oh, yes, like that's great, and you're glad they're suffering because you don't like them, right? Because you label them enemy, but actually they're human beings or sentient beings who are miserable, right? And so that's negative rejoicing, and that's another way of creating bad karma, because it's actually a poison in your mind, right? We don't notice that oftentimes. It's very easy, especially if you did it to somebody, you might feel, oh, that's really bad, but just sort of thinking, oh, good, they suffer, I don't want to be the one to say something mean, but oh, somebody else says something mean, that's funny, that's cool. Or again, these things where it's a group that you don't like, and then you feel happy that they are really going through a hard time. That's that. Okay, so and so here, I just got a minute, so we'll just finish up. So here, what you do is, right, you think of all those things, right? You have to acknowledge either ones you can remember, or then if you see a tendency like that, like let's say, for example, the one of being happy that, rejoicing at a negative thing, right? You may remember one instance and then realize, oh, well, I've probably done that a lot, when I didn't even notice it, wasn't aware. So here you confess that. Right? And ultimately confess, there are many ways of going about this. Is really about purification. And so there are many extensive practices for purification. But in very brief, the idea here is, is it okay if we go a couple more minutes? I'll just explain this and then we'll stop. So the idea is that ideally you would do the 4 powers. And let's go through them very quick. The first one would be, you generate, refuge and bodhicitta. Right? Then you, would, let's say this. Think about those negative actions until you actually generate an internal feeling of regret, right? Like regret meaning realizing it's like a cause of suffering. The analogy they usually give is as if you'd eaten poison, like that kind of regret. Like, oh, I'm going to be really sick or die from eating that. Like that you realize, at first you so giving I'll just give one example, right? The one we just gave. There's where at first you heard that let's say there's a whole nation that you don't like. Right? And then something bad happens to them, you go, oh, awesome. I'm so glad that happened to them. Right? And then you stop and you realize, wait a second, you have to contemplate, right? Regret means you actually contemplate. You think, first of all, I don't want, that's actually, that underlying that is hatred, actually, right? I didn't notice it, but actually that's really hatred, right? And there are all kinds of ordinary people who are suffering there, right? It's not just some nation, right? That nation isn't some sticker or something, right? It's actual people. And there are families who are suffering, and I was happy for that. What was I thinking? And if I cultivate that kind of mind, that's the exact opposite of love and compassion. That's a mind of where whatever I don't like, whatever I thought I didn't like about them, I'm actually guilty of in that moment, right? If I thought, usually it's if I think, well, I don't like them, why? Because they're not nice, right? Or something, they're mean, or actually I'm being mean, not them. That's my mind being that. And I'll create, and also karmically, I'm creating the cause for myself to experience the suffering they just experienced, right? So I don't want to be that person. I don't want to, I don't want to, it takes me away from enlightenment. I also don't want that suffering result. I don't want them to have that suffering result. And the Buddha said, right, if the problem is that they were being hateful before, well, the Buddha said, right, it was a fundamental truth. Hatred is never healed by hatred. Hatred is healed by love, right? So me being hateful is not going to stop them from being hateful. There's no benefit at all. It only harms, right? That until you generate this feeling of regret, well, yeah, I just don't. That's, like that. I want to purify that, right? So that's like intelligent regret. We'll go through this more in the teaching on karma. Then the third power is the power of an antidote. And that's where you would do something positive then, right? So you would do some positive action. You might meditate on love for them, you might recite mantras for them, you might, do something to help somebody, you might meditate on emptiness, they're all different, but you do a positive action to counteract the energy of that negative thing. And then the fourth one is you make a decision of restraint. Right? You say, I'm not going to do that. If you can say, I'm never going to do it again, great. If not, then I'm going to be really mindful and not do it for today, for tomorrow, for a week, whatever, or I'm going to recognize what situations I do that in, and I'm going to avoid those situations because I don't want to be that, like that. Does that make sense? And so ideally you would even build this confession into all four powers, and that really powerfully purifies the negative karma. Okay, so that's, and so that's in brief about confession. We'll go through the four powers much more in the section on karma. But, so we're about, so we're like, just about halfway through the section on the seven limbs, so next time we'll finish the section on seven limbs. Any questions? While we're finishing up. So let's just do our 2 verses of dedication. So, the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, where it has not arisen, may it arise and grow. Where it has arisen, may it not decrease, but increase more and more. In the snowy mountain paradise, you the source of good and happiness, all-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara.